Hey class, this is Mrs. Lin. Welcome to another week of remote learning. If my math is correct, I believe we're on week 7 already of remote learning. So we only have really a couple more weeks to go after this. So hopefully you're able to keep up with the work and you're finding that you're still learning a lot during this time. But also you get to make sure you go out a little bit to enjoy this nice weather that we're getting now that it's we're into May. So anyways, this week we're going to continue learning about variables in code.org. Now, last week that concept was introduced to you, and I think most of you did a really good job. You seem to understand the concept, which is great. This week it's going to be a little bit more challenging because we're introducing another concept called functions. Okay, so I want to go ahead and kind of talk about functions for a little bit. The lesson itself doesn't really talk about it too much. It kind of just expects you to work with functions, but I want to explain that to you a little bit. So going forward, you're not confused. So on my screen, you can see that I'm on lesson 8, level 1. And in my workspace, there's two sets of codes. So the first set is one that you're familiar with. It's the when run set of code, right? So basically, when the program is run, these are the codes that's going to be executed. But on the same workspace, you also see this set of code called functions. Okay, so this function is basically a section of code that's got a name. Okay, in this case, the name is called collect row, and this named section of program will perform a specific series of tasks when it's called. Okay, it could be a specific set of tasks or basically a routine that you have set. And so once you have basically defined a function and named it, okay, in this case it's called collect row, when you can then call on that function in your main set of program. Okay, so your main set of code is here, and you can basically call on that function a number of times. Okay, when you call it, the computer is going to run all the lines of code that's in that function. Okay, so this is useful because you can imagine if you look at the collect row function, it's got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines of code in there. Okay. Now imagine every time you want these 8 lines of code executed, if you have those 8 lines of code in your main program, it's going to get really cumbersome and long, right? So you want to be able to define a function um, and then call on it in this like very simple way, right? So right now, if I want these 8 lines of code to be run, I just need to say collect row in my main program. Okay, so this is really useful when you use that function many times throughout your program. You don't want to have to basically repeat these 8 lines every time you want that those 8 lines to be run in your program. Um, I am going to actually play you a short YouTube video with somebody explaining this in a different way that hopefully with me explaining it and then this other explanation, you will understand the concept more clearly. So this is a video by an NBA player, a basketball player, and he's going to explain the same thing I just did, but in basketball terms. And so, for those of you who are basketball players or who play really any team sport, you might be able to explain the role of functions and how you define and call a function more clearly with this video. So I'm going to go ahead and play it, and I'm going to stop it at the 1 minute mark. But this whole video will be posted in Google Classroom in case you want to watch the whole video. All right, so here we go.
One of the most important concepts in computer science is how to define new commands. how to add your own words to a computer language. Most computer languages have only about 100 words or commands, and really the art and magic is in defining your own new words out of these building blocks. We do this all the time in sports. For example, in basketball, you start by learning how to dribble, how to do a layup, how to rebound. Once you've learned these really basic moves, you learn new moves and put together these building blocks, like a pick and roll or a give and go. And you can then go from there to do more complex plays. And once you learn that play and give it a name, everybody on the team knows how to do it. Similarly, once you've taught a computer how to do an action once using these sequence of commands, you can make up your own name for that action, so it's easy to repeat it later. When you define your own command and give it a name, that's called a function.
All right, so I hope that explanation was pretty clear, right? If you play basketball, you know that there's a lot of basic skills that you might learn, such as dribble and pass and making a rebound. But a coach might put a little routine together and give it a name, such as pick and roll, and refer to that name when he wants you to do a series of skills. Okay, so hopefully that makes functions a little bit easier to understand for you. But again, if you have any questions during the week, you can reach out to me and I'll be happy to explain it a little bit more. So let's go through a couple of levels for this lesson because I think it is a little bit more challenging than the lessons in the past few weeks. So for level 1 of lesson 8, all we're asked to do is to finish this code so that the bee can collect all the honey and nectar. Remember, we're working with functions, right? So let's look at the function really quickly. When collect row is called, the bee is going to repeat for a X number of times. We don't really know how many times just yet. This move forward line. So we're going to move forward however many times, okay, and then get nectar, okay, however many times, and then move forward again, and then make honey when you get to this make honey block, okay. So I can see in my little game space that the number of times I have to get nectar and make honey each time is 2, okay. So it looks like um, the gather variable is what I'm going to be using right now to set the number of times I get nectar and make honey, right? So set gather to 2 because everything on the board tells me that I have to do it twice, okay? So let's do that. I have to also move forward how many times? Twice, right? In order to get to the nectar. So I'm going to go ahead and say move forward. Let me see, where's my function or my variable? So I'm going to basically repeat, let's see, number of gather times. So gather is 2, right? So I'm going to basically move forward twice, okay? And then I'm going to get nectar twice. Okay, so again, I'm going to go back to that variable. Oops. Okay. And then I'm going to use that one more time. Okay, so I have to get nectar twice and I have to make honey twice. Okay, now again, gather is set to 2. Okay, and that's why I'm using that variable in these boxes. Okay, now how many times do you actually have to repeat this collect row function? Well, I can see that the first time I'm gonna collect this row, right? And then I have to turn left, okay? And then do the same thing in this row. So I have to collect this row, right? And then I have to turn left and then collect the last row. So the whole program should repeat, or the function should repeat 3 times, right? Because I have 3 rows of honey and nectar to collect and make. Okay, so right here was when it says repeat, I actually have to repeat that 3 times. Okay, so let's go to my math block. And this is where I can get that block where I can just set it to a number. Okay, so I'm going to repeat this 3 times. Okay, so let's go ahead and click run. Okay, to see how this demo works. Okay, so as you can see, I'm calling, oops, I just want to show you again, okay, before I move on to the next stage. I'm setting the gather variable. Oops, I don't really like it when code.org just advances me to the next page when I'm not ready to go. Okay, but anyways, so let's go through the code really quickly. So I set the gather to 2, the variable is to 2, right? Because I know I have to move forward twice in order to get to my first nectar. Okay, so when I run that collect row or call on that collect row function, okay, I'm repeating twice move forward because I'm moving forward 2 spaces to get to my first nectar. Okay, then again, I'm getting nectar twice, right? Collecting nectar twice. And then I'm going to move forward to get me to my next honey block. Okay, and then there I'm going to repeat twice the make honey command. Okay, and then at the as a very last step, I'm going to turn left so I can be ready for my next call of function, right? So then after the first time I call that function, I'm going to repeat it 2 more times, right? So in total, I'm repeating that function 3 times. Okay, let's get to the second level. Okay, and again, I've done these levels already, so I might have to spend a minute to click start over so that way you can see my clean code. Okay, it says edit your solution in one place, just one place, so the bee can collect all the honey and nectar. So let's look at our code. Okay, I can see in my game space that instead of 2 nectars and 2 make honeys, now I have to actually do 3 of those. So where in my code should I make that change? And remember, I can only change it in one place. Okay, I'm going to give you guys a second to look at your code. Okay, so remember the number of times we repeat this get nectar or move forward or make honey is set by the gather variable. Okay, now in the previous level, we only had to gather everything twice. But in this level, I can see that there's 3 nectars and 3 honeys, right? So this is where I'm going to go ahead and change my variable. So I'm going to change my variable gather to the value 3. Okay, and that way, when my collect row function is called, it's going to repeat the moves and the get nectars and the make honey codes 3 times. Okay, because that's how many times I've set it to be instead of 2 times. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and click run again. All right, and that's that level. That level should be nice and easy because we're only changing one place. All right, and level 3, I think this is where it gets a little bit tricky. Okay, now, oh, again, I want to go ahead and hit start over. Okay, now let's look at the game space. In this puzzle, each patch needs the variable to be 1 less than the patch before. So you want to subtract 1 from the variable each time through the loop if you want to use the same function to solve this level. So we're not actually going to change anything in the function itself because the function stays the same. Basically, we're going to move forward any number of times, right? And then we're going to gather the nectar however many times it sets, right? Now, if you look at my game space though, that number actually decreases every time we run this loop. So the first time we're going to start with the number of gathers to 3, right? So it's going to gather the number of, or sorry, gather the nectar 3 times, collect or make honey 3 times here. But then in the next loop, when I call this collect row function, my number of get nectars and move forwards and make honey is decreased by 1. Okay, so that means somewhere in this block, this repeat block, I need to add a line of code that subtracts 1 from the variable each time this loop is run. Okay, so you've never seen this before, so I'm going to go ahead and show it to you. But right now, basically, we're working on this block right here, this repeat 3 blocks. So the first time the function is called, it's just going to run as it goes, right, as we have it set. But then in this repeat function, I want to make sure um, I set the variable to 1 less. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that. I'm going to move this function block a little bit away. So it says set gather to, okay, so it's going to run the function 1 time. But then before it runs it again, I want to make sure I set the gather variable to 1 less. Okay, so let's go to the math block. Okay, and this is the block that I want you guys to look at. Okay, so it says set gather to, okay, well, we want set gather to be 1 less than what it was before, right? So we want gather minus 1, okay? I know this might be a little bit tricky, but basically in on code.org, you can set a variable or change its value anytime within your program. In this case, we're going to change the value of gather right here to gather minus 1. Again, I'm not using 3 minus 1 because gather is a variable that could be changed at any time, right? So right now, gather is set initially to 3, but every time I run this function, I'm going to actually decrease its value by 1. Okay, and how I do that is by setting the value of the variable here again using the set variable block, and then also this math block. Okay, so this is probably the trickiest thing you're going to have to do in this whole lesson because we haven't seen it before. Okay, but just play with it, practice with it. I'm going to go ahead and run it to show you how it's run. Remember, every time this code is run, okay, or this function is run, we're going to set the variable to something else. We're going to change the value of the variable to something else. In this case, it's minus 1. In another level, you're going to see that you actually have to add 1 to the variable. But basically, you're working with the same idea here, okay, that you can actually reset your variable to whatever you want it to be within the program. So you don't only have to do it here, okay, you can actually do it other places in your program. Okay, so this is actually where I'm going to end the video because I think you got enough kind of basic ideas of how to set variables within your program, how to use functions to kind of tackle the next few levels. It is going to be a more challenging lesson. You might have to kind of count your blocks, count your patterns before you can figure out how many times you have to move something, how many times you have to or what variable you need to set this gather to be initially, or the value of that variable initially. But I think you can do it. If you need help during the week, remember you can email me, and I'll walk you through these levels. On a one-to-one basis if you need in a Zoom meeting. Otherwise, I'll go over some of this again on Friday. Remember to watch for that video if you need. Again, I'll post that YouTube video in Google Classroom along with this tutorial. and have fun with it. Remember, part of coding is learning how to look for bugs in your code and debug. So if you do run into errors, don't get frustrated. Just start over, read over your code to see where you might have gone wrong, and just persevere through that. All right. Have fun this week, and hopefully, I will see you Friday. Bye.